When people say I changed the culture of Boeing, that was the intent. You either say safety trumps everything or it doesn't. And as soon as it doesn't, you don't have a safety culture.
It makes it easier almost to make decisions by spreadsheet and focus on the financials.
And they actually tend to have more of an impact on how people behave than the town hall meeting or the headshot video. Is it so bad now that it's irrecoverable?
What happened is private enterprise has come in and essentially asset stripped.
Success, profit, money, wealth, they have the potential to be highly addictive.
Maybe finally we're becoming a little bit more enlightened than just chasing profit for profit's sake.
We'd like to think that there's a certain, muscle memory that can be reawakened in parts of the organization.
Being ethical, sustainable, and a good company to work for is also a route to being financially successful as well.
To be honest, I am that highly paid management consultant who actually, I'm not really adding much value, but it pays for quite a nice lifestyle. Thank you very much. And you are pressing me where it hurts.
Should we be heartened by the exponential growth of B Corps?
The way those companies operate at the moment, to change radically, I think they have to maybe die and get reborn.
Welcome everybody to this episode of Work Punks. Today again we have Colin Newlyn, Ben Simpson and Paul Jansen as usual. Just the three of us today, reflecting on what is happening in the world of work today. Colin, what caught your eye, I understand, is the most recent developments at Boeing. What's so peculiar about it for you?
Yeah, so I wrote about this in my newsletter last week because there's been lots of problems with Boeing. And they had, the two flights that crashed a couple of years ago, and then more recently, this door fell off. I actually saw some footage online today. It's pretty scary. This sort of like big hole in the side of the plane, and all the oxygen masks dropping down. And clearly, there's a problem here. It's when you look at it, obviously their safety culture is not working, and in fact, I can quote the FAA audit said that their manufacturing protocols were not what one would expect if safety was a first priority. And what they're really saying is safety is no longer a first priority, which is pretty worrying in people who build aeroplanes. So, how did this come about? Well, it seems to go back to the merger with McDonnell Douglas, which was described by many in Boeing as more of a takeover. And the McDonnell Douglas executives got put in charge and they started to focus more on profit. And Boeing had been known for its engineering excellence and its very high safety record, and was very much, that was the pride of the people that were there. But this new focus obviously detracted from that. And it was absolutely intentional. The CEO at the time said, when people say I changed the culture of Boeing, that was the intent. So it's run like a business rather than a great engineering firm. I guess why didn't anybody ask him to justify this? Because that seems to be a bit worrisome. And of course, it didn't happen overnight. The safety culture didn't fall apart overnight. It just gradually decayed because, you either have a safety culture or you don't. You either say safety trumps everything or it doesn't. And as soon as it doesn't, you don't have a safety culture. And we're only now seeing the problems, which are, extremely severe and have resulted in, people dying. It's pretty serious stuff. And I noticed today or yesterday, I think, that the CEO is leaving and the chairman's resigning at the end of his period. And they're going to have to go back to, being an engineering company with a great safety culture that also makes some money, which is where they should have been all along. I always feel a bit uncomfortable talking about culture because it's all a bit vague, but it's very clear that these sorts of changes, culture is the way people do things around here, and the way decisions get made. And these changes take a long time to come about but you can trace it back to an event and say that's when it changed, and the impact happens a lot further down the track when the people who instigated the changes have taken their bonuses and run away into the sunset. And I also referred to rail track in the UK when British Rail got privatized, and exactly the same thing happened. A profit objective, financial objectives were brought in. Everybody told the government this will ruin safety culture. The government said, "Oh no, it won't." And sadly, we had several train crashes, including one with a lot of fatalities. Yeah, why does this happen? Why do we allow it to happen?
I think, especially in the McDonnell Douglas stroke Boeing story, there are some interesting observations to be made, right? That although it's as you say yourself, culture is quite nebulous. It's quite difficult to put your hands around to grab what it's all about. In hindsight, and from a distance, actually, you see some of the decisions that they made deliberately having a massive impact on the culture. For instance, how they decided to have their head office moved from close to the manufacturing plants to actually, I don't know, far, far away, 1,000 miles plus away from where everything was happening and everything was built. Which it sends a message, right? We don't want to be compromised too much by technical stuff and technical problems. We don't really want to hear it. And B, it creates it makes it easier almost to make decisions by spreadsheet and focus on the financials, because you don't get that immediate feedback, or you don't have to necessarily face the consequences of some of your decisions that you have to make. So I've seen it elsewhere. I've seen Philips Electronics, obviously a massive Dutch firm, also very much pride and joy of the world of engineers for many, many decades in the Netherlands. At some point decided to move its head office from Eindhoven, and Eindhoven was pretty much Philips town. They decided to move their head office to Amsterdam, again to try and make it more profitable, but ultimately it just helped to decline. It helped the decline of the company, I think, to a great extent. So those decisions on their own are probably never the only thing, but the message also that is accompanying such a decision is received loud and clear, isn't it?
Yeah, we label those sorts of things permissions, and leaders are emitting thousands, maybe even tens of thousands of those every day, and a lot of them unconsciously. And they actually tend to have more of an impact on how people behave than the town hall meeting or the headshot video or the, this is our strategy or our new values or cultural ambitions or whatever. It's those big decisions that get made, and also the micro interactions that tell people actually quite clearly what is permissible and what isn't. So in this case, it was that focus being on the head office and the P&L and all the rest of it told people that to take shortcuts with engineering was highly permissible. Because that was the shadow that the leaders were casting, and once the leaders do that, then we get into this stuff that Simon Sinek, I think, has got a really good. So he refers to it as abstraction. So the top team's view of the business is on the spreadsheets, as you mentioned, Paul, and the presentations that get brought to their door, which essentially get brought to their door by people who want to please them and don't want to be the bringers of bad news. And that's probably one of the forks in the road that determines the situation they're now in. The question, I guess, in my mind for Boeing, I have no idea what the probabilities are, but is it so bad now that it's irrecoverable? There's quite a lot of people now, before they book a flight, they interrogate the system and and see what plane they're going to be flying on.
Well, by rights, they should, given the calamity of this scale, really, they should disappear. But they won't, because there's only two aircraft manufacturers. So you've got a 50-50 chance when you turn up for your flight. And I don't know whether that impact on consumers has been, is that strong as of yet. Yeah, so they're too big to fail.
Right.
But actually, the FAA have basically said, they're going to put this right because we're going to make sure they do. Hence all departures. And ultimately, I guess, the threat is we won't license your planes and you won't be able to sell them.
Yeah, and then I'm glad that regulation, certainly in the airline industry, is as strict as it is, and also the safety culture in general is as strict as it is, which helps us under circumstances. I think it's in nobody's interest to have ultimately bad planes, of course, flying half our flights, but at the same time, it's in nobody's interest to only have one airplane manufacturer either to choose from. That will ultimately also result, I think, in slipping standards and poorer products. So I'm pretty sure the airline industry itself will want to have at least Boeing kept alive and Boeing being a good competitor of Airbus, because otherwise it will, we'll see prices rising quite dramatically fairly quickly, I think.
I mean, it's a problem that because what you've seen is this massive concentration in the airline industry because of the costs of development and scales of production. Again, because there's been a desire to drive down the costs all the time. Boeing is effectively, a monopoly in the strict definition of a monopoly is any company that's got more than 25% share of the market. We see increasingly markets where companies, and often more than one company, have that monopoly position, and that's always bad news for everybody except the shareholders, basically.
Yeah.
And regulation is really is really important to maintain standards and safety and protect consumers and all that sort of stuff. So when you look at the water industry in the UK, which has been privatized, and regulation is weak, and it's an absolutely appalling situation with the report today that even more shit is being poured into our rivers than ever. And again, this is a failure. This is a market failure. This is, and the law of unintended consequences, I think, applies here, because I think when privatization was carried out, the belief was that private enterprises would come in and would inject capital and would upgrade the services and be more effective and efficient than a publicly run body. And what happened is private enterprises come in and essentially asset stripped. There's been no investment. There's been loading of debt in order to take profit for the shareholders. I mean, I never agreed with privatization, and I don't particularly accept the dogma of it, but I actually don't think the people that carried it out intended it or ever thought it would turn out the way it has. And that shows a certain sort of decay in the way that we do capitalism these days and what organizations are about. Because it's all about, chasing profits and damn the consequences. And the consequences are pretty severe and generally end up being picked up by us lot, the consumers and the citizens who have to pick up the pieces when things fall apart or when planes fall out of the sky.
Which makes me think, Ben, that your progressive MBA is badly needed. Because clearly there is something wrong here with the perception of why you run a business in the first place, right?
Yeah, I was thinking just that yesterday. It's all very well showing, getting all excited about being ethical and responsible and sustainable and all the rest of it. But maybe we also need to learn lessons of where we, intentionally or otherwise, end up in a place where we really, really are a bad company. And the consequences of that, whether that's, Enron, Purdue Pharma, Boeing. I mean, there's the back catalogue's huge. And we need to learn the lessons of the past, in terms of profit. Profit is essential. Profit is the oxygen that keeps organizations alive. But we can fly too close to the sun, and lots of big organizations, consciously or unconsciously, have completely untethered themselves from their original purpose and chased profit to the point that everything collapses unless they're too big to fail, banks and Boeing, and then everyone loses out. So yeah, I think this isn't a fluffy and a nice thing to have. This is a scary bear trap that our future leaders need to be really, really aware of, because to an extent, success, profit, money, wealth, they have the potential to be highly addictive. The more you get, the more you want. So we've had a stellar year this year, 20% increase in profits. Well, we can't go backwards. We've got to do more. We've got to do more. We've got to do more. And now set clearly in a context where we are, for the first time, waking up to the fact that we are living on a planet with finite resources and unending growth and unending waste production is just so out of kilter with our reality. So. Yeah, I think you're absolutely right. Hearing myself say all that, you just think, well, there really is an awful lot on the plate for those future leaders, and we need to do all that we can to help, I think.
Yeah, I think
I'm getting the impression that we're making one step forward and then two steps back, or is it two steps forward and one step back? I prefer the latter, but I'm not quite sure which one we are following at the moment, because you do get the impression that there is more conscientious business management going on from time to time, and you see some big players stepping up to the market thinking, okay, well, this is maybe finally we're becoming a little bit more enlightened than just chasing profit for profit's sake. But then, of course, you get the Boeing story. You more recently you see Unilever going back much more in a shareholder value mindset, whereas with the new CEO who's just arrived, who's announced that they're going to shed their ice cream business for whatever reason, but their main argument being, we want to, our main focus is, creating shareholder value. And I'm thinking, well, this was something from 10, 20 years ago. And if some of our biggest firms on the planet are going back to that, making their sole focus, then something is serious. Then something is clearly not progressing.
I think one of the problems is, we've fallen, or many people have fallen into this idea that profit is an organizing principle. And it's not. It's an outcome. It's not even it's an essential outcome, but but we should see it as being a necessary but not sufficient condition of a successful company. Actually, it's now seen, well, if you're making a profit, then you're a successful company. Even though, as we can see in the case of Boeing, actually you're making a profit by digging out foundations and selling them off, and eventually, the house tumbles down. We have a real problem in the way that our capitalism is structured, I think. I mean, you mentioned Unilever. The world food production is dominated by 6 firms, of which Unilever is one. So, if they're all chasing profit and ignoring the consequences, that's going to lead us to a very bad place. I think we're some way on the way to that. If you look at obesity levels and the impact of bad diets on health.
Yeah. My book at the moment is Ultra Processed People. Chris Van Tuken, I think is how you pronounce his name. Telecom. Thank you. And yeah, he I think he would suggest, and it's a very, very well researched and evidenced bit of writing. He would suggest that we're already there, with the US diet being 80% ultra processed and ours not too far behind. And we've sleptwalked into that, led by those 6 main producers, into a quite a nasty, well, the situation of a global obesity pandemic and all that goes with it. We used to think that was just type 2 diabetes and heart conditions and stuff, but it's massive. It's thyroid, it's liver, it's brain, it's absolutely huge, this damage that we're doing to ourselves. So yeah, we're absolutely there, but again, that book is full of organizations that are big players in the market, like Coca-Cola, funding their own research that suits their own aims. Just has been the case with the petrochemical industry, just was the same with the opioid scandal in the States, also hooked in the regulator. The damage that's been done by those things is globally massive, right? And it's the root cause of it is just one thing, and that is greed. It's just as simple as that. If there was no greed, those problems wouldn't exist, and we wouldn't be pumping sewage into our seas, and we wouldn't have 1 in 4 primary school kids obese.
But I mean, it comes back to this, nebulous, fuzzy concept of culture, because it's become acceptable to behave in bad ways to pursue profit, and that's become normalized, because as you said, the signals are sent out by what the leaders do. So if we go back to Boeing, if it's the case that you see a safety problem and you call it out and they say, oh yeah, we really need to deal with this, then that's what you do. If every time you do it, they say, what's the cost of this going to be? How's it going to affect production?
Mm-hmm.
Can we afford to deal with this right? Then people get the message, well, maybe I shouldn't be raising these issues. Maybe I'll just ignore it this time. And so the whole thing decays. And we've had a similar thing, some of the behaviors of these companies would have been unthinkable, literally unthinkable, 40 years ago. And now they're perfectly normalized. And it's by small degrees we've had this shift. And I do think we're getting to a point where, I mean, it can get worse, but there's only one way it's going to end up, and that's going to be in a big untidy heap, and we're going to have to try and pull something out of the wreckage and rebuild it.
Money is almost the common denominator of all of our languages, of all of our decisions, right? So the money aspect always comes in whatever choice we make and whatever conversation we have. And it irons out almost the nuance of, I think, the topic that you're trying to make a decision on. And I even see it in... so let me give you an example. So as you know, I'm on the board of a social enterprise, of 2 social enterprises as it happens. And we were having a strategic discussion at the board the other day. And we were talking about our ambition and essentially how big we want to be. And one of my colleague board members said, I think we need to be, turnover-wise, we need to be twice as big. Okay. I mean, there may be good reasons why he picked that number, and it may be the perfect ambition. I have nothing against that in itself. But what I did observe was then you start having a conversation about size, about an amount of money that the company is supposed to be making, turning over, bringing in, and immediately you skip the step about why are we here? So actually, we're here to help people deal with a certain condition. So actually, the conversation shouldn't be about how much money are we bringing in every year, but how many people are we actually helping with that particular condition? And are we doing more to help maybe the same number of people dealing with that condition? Or could we help other people have a similar condition, but not quite the same condition? So you've put all of the content to one side and you just talk about the money bit. And once you start just talking about the money bit, you get all these unintended consequences that clearly happened at Boeing and so many of those other organizations, that the recipient of that message, oh, we need to double in size, now translates that into money rather than into helping more people. And that's where the unintended consequences then, I think, take hold. And people start to chase the wrong goals.
Yeah, I mean, it's abstraction again, isn't it? Abstraction from the purpose of the organization.
Exactly.
Because you've got an organization there that is totally rooted in purpose. That's quite a worrying thing. But on your
and I'm just saying it to illustrate how an easy trap it is to fall into. But the message that I wanted to give also is that let's assume Boeing is going to Boeing is definitely going to be bringing in a new CEO, and he's going to be, or she is going to be tasked with bringing in or creating a new culture. And the language, therefore, that this person is going to be bringing in and the actions and the behaviors that this person is going to demonstrate are going to set the tone there, aren't they? How long will it take for the right influence to have its visible impact, do you think?
Yeah, no, I think that it's interesting to look at the slope down and the slope up, because I don't know what you guys think. I'd be fascinated to hear, but I think that, you know, we have to be careful with labels, don't we? But just for convenience, you know, toxicity is so much more, permeates so quickly, whereas a shining light seems to take a long time. You know, so if we chunk that down from the meta view of an organization, I don't know how many people Boeing's got, 80,000, whatever it is, but if we just take that down to a team level, you know, you can have a really good team and you can throw in a one bad apple and it changes the climate, how that team feels, like that. You don't have such a marked change, I don't think, if you introduce a real brilliant shining star. I'm not sure that the efficacy is the same. I think that it's very, very easy to take culture in the wrong direction and takes a lot of hard work to build it back up. So I don't know what you guys think, but I do kind of sense that the hole they're climbing out of is going to seem a lot steeper and deeper than it did when they tumbled into it.
Well, but they didn't tumble into it, did they? They slowly
slipped away.
Yeah, I think in Boeing's favour, you know, that the engineering focus and the safety culture was part of their DNA. So you'd like to think that there's a certain, you know, muscle memory that can be reawakened in parts of the organization. And they have, you know, the regulator is absolutely determined that there will be a positive outcome to this story, and has a lot of clout. So, you know, that bodes well for them. I think for other organizations, it is, as you say, more difficult. Yeah, that's what I mean. Yeah, that's why I think some organizations are going to disappear, because I don't think they can make the transition to the sorts of cultures they need to survive in the future. So, you know, whilst there are stories of organizations, you know, switching to more progressive cultures and bringing in self-organization and all those other good practices that we like to talk about, I think a lot of them are just going to find it impossible.
It's partly determined by to what extent we really start to price in the negative side effects that a lot of organizations cause with either their products and services or with their way of behaving towards their employees and their customers.
Yeah.
And as long as that's not priced in, the good ones still have a bigger mountain to climb than the bad ones. I know.
For the sake of the conversation, I'm gonna toss in a counter view. You know, something that I kind of had drilled into me when I was improving my practices around continual improvement and quality improvements. Yeah, quality is free. You know, if you work really, really hard improving quality, then there's a net gain in terms of the financial efficiencies of the firm. And then if we look at something like Hertzberg, and you know, we look at the hygiene factors, which, let's remember, only take us to the norm of performance individually or collectively in teams. So that's stuff like, you know, pay and status and benefits and salary, you know, all of that stuff. And then all of the super motivators, the stuff above the line, the stuff that takes people from just a common garden level of performance to super and hyper performance is free. You know, it's about a sense of belonging, a sense of purpose, personal mastery, relationships with your boss, and up, down, and across the organization. So I actually think there is some evidence, if we go looking for it, there is some evidence to say that actually being ethical, sustainable, and a good company to work for is also a route to being financially successful as well. And I certainly don't see them as being, well, Bertzorg, you know, let's take that. That's an organization of reasonable scale. I don't know, 10, 15,000, wherever they are at the moment. Paul, you'd know better than me, but, you know, on all of the financial and outcome metrics for them and the client base that they serve, sort of 20, 30% against the conventional approach. And the same for the employee experience, you know, and therefore retention and da-da-da-da-da. So I think it might have been the case that it's a choice. Do we want to be ethical? Do we want to be profitable? But I think increasingly, maybe there's more of a fuzziness around that.
I'd like to think that you're right, and obviously I'm working in this field because I want to believe that you're right in that, and I want to help organizations demonstrate that indeed you're correct in all of those assumptions. I share those assumptions. I'm realistic enough to see that there is a lot of inertia in the systems that we live in, and that it will take quite a bit of momentum in order to get those systems more widely to move as such. And it's I saw the other day that Rutger Bregman, or Rutger Bregman, pronounced in Dutch, who wrote Humankind a couple of years ago, quite a bestseller. He also appeared at Davos and famously did these sessions where he was slating everybody present for not paying their taxes properly. He is now launched, or he's issued a follow-on from his book Humankind, which is called Moral Ambition, I believe, or something along those lines. And he's certainly also creating a movement for moral ambition, where he essentially wants to encourage people of great ambition to move away from almost the dark side. Okay, those essentially where most of these jobs he feels do not add value to society at large. They add value to individual companies perhaps, but not in a good way. They add value to those operators themselves, those individuals, because they get good salaries and live nice lives. But he wants to encourage people to move from that side of the equation to applying their ambition and their energies and their creativity and all the other good skills that they have to something that is going to add value to society. So it's interesting to see that discussion developing in Holland. There's a lot of it has some it reminds me a little bit of the bullshit jobs conversation that took place a couple of years ago, based on that book by, was it David Graeber? Is that his name?
Yeah.
Because yes, there's a lot of people coming out of the woodworks to say, yeah, to be honest, I am that highly paid management consultant who actually, I'm not really adding much value, but it pays for quite a nice lifestyle. Thank you very much. And you are pressing me where it hurts. And perhaps I should be rethinking why I'm on this planet, and should be thinking about what I can do instead. So it will be interesting to see where that conversation goes. Of course, it's never just the one person who's going to make the whole system move in this direction, but hopefully it will add a little bit. Let's wait and see. It would be nice to see to what extent it will spread outside of the Netherlands. Who knows?
Should we be heartened by the exponential growth of B Corps here in the UK and more widely in the West? Is that so? I mean, I think they are. The growth is exponential. I don't think I'm overstating it, but they still represent less than 1% of organisations, certainly here in the UK. But the funny old thing about exponential growth is those numbers pretty soon creep up on you. But should we be heartened by that? Should we, once that gets to 3%, will that be a tipping point? I don't know. I'd be interested in your thoughts.
I don't know that it'll be. I mean, it's introducing. I mean, it's changing the conversation, isn't it? Because it's raising issues that would not have been considered before, and it's something that I think part of the reason for its increase is that it's something that millennials and particularly Gen Z are looking for that clear commitment and a statement of purpose and ethical behaviours. So yeah, I've just got the Buckminster Fuller quote up in front of me. You never change things by fighting the existing reality. To change something, build a new model that makes the existing model obsolete. And B Corps I don't think it's a total solution. It's got its flaws, but it's a step in the right direction. And there'll be, once companies start to adopt B Corps, maybe there'll be something else that comes out that pushes it a bit further. We will get away from this. And I think what Bregman is doing is interesting because, one of the problems we've had this, I would say, decay in corporate behavior and ethics and stuff is that there's been a detachment of the people making these decisions from society in a way. What did we call it before? It's abstraction.
Yeah.
So they can make these, it used to be back in the day that if somebody running a company made an unpopular decision, he'd have to go to church on Sunday and face the unwelcoming stares, and might not be invited to certain dinner parties, and there would be some consequences. But now these people are so detached that there aren't, and by raising the issue of ethics and purpose and that sort of stuff as a valid challenge to these people, then we can start to get some correction in behaviour, I think. But and that's why I would advocate having workers involved in the board. I think we should have workers sitting on remuneration committees, because they wouldn't have the cheek to pay themselves such ridiculous money if somebody working on the shop floor turned around and said, "How much do you want to pay yourself?" So reintroducing that sort of challenge, I think, is helpful. But ultimately, the way those companies operate at the moment, to change radically, I think they have to maybe die and get reborn. Or just be superseded by better structures. And that's why I think I think we're all advocates of what we think are better structures, and it's very important that we carry on banging the drum and waving the flag.
Absolutely.
And we will. You bet. I think this is a great point to conclude this episode of Work Punks.
Yep.
Let us know if you share our viewpoints. Perhaps you have a completely opposite viewpoint or a third way. Please join in the discussion. We'd love to hear. Please put it in comments or just interact with us on LinkedIn or drop us a note. Looking forward to seeing you at the next episode. Watch this space. As you know, we are out as a podcast as well as on YouTube. So make sure that you find the version that works for you. So thanks for watching and or listening, and see you next time. Bye.
Cheerio.
Bye.
Cheers.